A dark secret is lurking within my family, and I can't bear it any longer. From family gatherings, secretive glances, to a question that I can't ignore. Are Amy's children really Luke's? It's something I've never dared to ask, but the suspicions keep growing. And now, as my daughter and Amy's son begin to feel something beyond friendship, I know I must uncover the truth. I am a 42-year-old woman, married to Luke, the man I fell in love with back in college. Luke and Amy have been best friends since childhood, a bond so strong that I couldn't fully comprehend. They grew up together, shared everything, and had a very special connection, which they always insisted was sibling-like. When I first started dating Luke, I felt a bit uneasy about the closeness between him and Amy. Though they assured me their relationship was not romantic, I couldn't shake the discomfort of seeing how close they were. But Luke and Amy always put my mind at ease, reassuring me that I had nothing to worry about and that they were just friends, nothing more. Over time, I began to accept Amy's presence in our lives. She wasn't just Luke's friend, she was mine too. We spent many long nights together, helping Amy with her dating life, as she often lamented about her bad luck in love. While Luke and I started building our family and having kids, Amy also had children. A while later, Amy became pregnant and had children of her own, but we never knew the fathers. She always claimed she didn't know, and it seemed like she wasn't very concerned with finding out. I assumed maybe Amy was just casual with her relationships and perhaps didn't keep in touch with her one-night stands. I never pressed her for answers. Our relationship with Amy grew closer, and she became a more integral part of our family. Luke was always there to support her, and as far as I was concerned, that was just what friends did. We were financially stable and able to help Amy without hesitation. There were times when Amy struggled, but Luke always stepped in to support her and her children. This never bothered me because we had the means, and I believed in helping her without expecting anything in return. However, over time, something began to feel off. Amy's children, especially the older ones, started to resemble Luke in ways I couldn't ignore. I tried to dismiss it at first, but it became harder to ignore the similarities. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't be sure of their paternity. Luke always acted like a father figure to Amy's kids, but I started wondering if there was more to their relationship than I had ever considered. Despite trying to suppress these thoughts, I couldn't help but wonder, could these children actually be Luke's? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from me. And as Amy's children grew older, the more I began to notice the uncanny resemblances. I couldn't help but ask myself, what if I was the only one who didn't know the truth? Although I tried to brush it off, these suspicions began to eat away at me, making me question everything I thought I knew about Luke, Amy, and their bond. What had I missed? Had I been naive all these years? The doubt started to cloud my mind, and I couldn't help but feel like I was the last to know something important. After years of building our family life, my suspicions began to grow stronger. I couldn't ignore the strange similarities between Amy's children and Luke. Features like eye color, hair color, and peculiar habits that I had noticed over time kept coming to mind. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but eventually the resemblance became so undeniable that I couldn't brush it off any longer. As my daughter Sophie grew older, I started noticing a shift in how she viewed her relationship with Amy's children. Sophie, being smart and independent, began spending more time with Tom, Amy's eldest son. I sensed something different in the way they interacted. Something more than just friendship. They would spend long hours talking, hanging out, and I couldn't help but wonder if their bond could evolve into something deeper. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. If my suspicions were correct, Tom and Sophie could be half-siblings. That thought wasn't just a shock to me. It threatened to unravel everything within our family. The closeness between Luke and Amy only added to my confusion. While I tried to convince myself that these thoughts were irrational, the situation seemed more and more unclear. One evening, as Luke and I sat together, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I decided it was time to ask the question I had avoided for so long. Have you ever been intimate with Amy? Luke looked at me, surprised at first, but I could feel the tension in the air. He didn't respond right away, as if carefully considering his words. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure of where the next step would lead. Luke finally replied, his voice calm but weary. "You know, we've talked about this before. Amy and I are just friends, just friends." His answer didn't reassure me. It only made me more unsettled. Why did it feel like he was protecting something? Why couldn't I fully trust his words? Although I knew I shouldn't dig too deep into his and Amy's past, the nagging doubt inside me couldn't be ignored. The strange resemblances between the children, especially between Tom and Sophie, kept haunting me. While Luke always insisted there was nothing between him and Amy, I couldn't help but wonder if something was being hidden. Was I being paranoid? Or was there really a secret that no one had ever revealed? The uncertainty continued to weigh on me, and I realized that perhaps I had been too trusting in the past. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I had missed something important. The unease grew stronger, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. The truth, whether it was painful or not, was something I needed to uncover. But the more I searched for answers, the more I began to question everything I thought I knew about Luke, Amy, and the bond they shared. As my suspicions about the relationship between Amy and Luke grew deeper, things only became more tense when Sophie, my daughter, told me that Tom, Amy's eldest son, had asked her out. At first, I was just surprised, but soon a feeling of unease overwhelmed me. Sophie had never been particularly interested in dating, and since I was very protective of her innocence, I had always insisted that she consult me before making any decisions about relationships. Sophie had always been a mature and intelligent girl, but at that moment I could sense something more in the way she looked at Tom. It wasn't just a simple friendship anymore. When I insisted that she reject Tom, Sophie looked at me with confusion and disappointment. She didn't openly protest, but I could tell she was hurt. She couldn't understand why I was stopping her from pursuing a relationship that seemed innocent. After all, Tom had been part of the family for years, but I knew the real reason wasn't the age gap. It was because something didn't sit right with me about their growing connection. Their relationship had started to go beyond the boundaries of friendship, and I was terrified of where it might lead. I was torn. If this were a normal situation, I wouldn't have interfered in my daughter's feelings, but I couldn't ignore my fears. Tom wasn't just any guy. He was potentially her half-brother. That thought alone made my anxiety spiral. What if they ended up getting closer than they should? What would that mean for our family? I couldn't stop watching their interactions, noticing how Tom always seemed to focus on Sophie, his eyes lingering on her, his proximity to her growing more and more noticeable during family gatherings. It wasn't just innocent. It made me feel sick to my stomach. After I forbade Sophie from dating Tom, I couldn't ignore how Luke and Amy reacted. Both agreed with my decision, but their responses didn't feel convincing. Luke seemed worried that I might push Sophie into rebelling, but what troubled me most was Amy's response. She wasn't strongly opposed to the idea, and that indifference made me uneasy. She wasn't treating it as seriously as I thought she should. No one in the family, not even Luke or Amy, seemed to understand why I felt so strongly about this. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. If I didn't intervene, would something unethical happen? The worry turned into confusion. I wasn't just afraid that Tom and Sophie would cross a line, I was afraid of the reality of my suspicions about Luke and Amy. What if they were actually half-siblings? I couldn't bear the thought of my daughter and Amy's son, who might share the same father, getting involved in a way that felt too natural and close. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, where every choice I made could change everything. Finally, I could no longer stay silent. The unease I felt had been growing for too long, and I knew I had to face the truth, even if it meant everything would fall apart. Since my suspicions about Amy and Luke began to haunt me, I realized I couldn't keep avoiding the issue. I needed to confront them and ask for the truth. That day, when things had quieted down, I told Luke and Amy that we needed to have a serious conversation. I didn't want either of them to hear it from anyone else, and I didn't want them to have time to prepare their answers. I wanted both of them to hear exactly why I was so worried. We sat down, and I began recounting all the details I had noticed over the years. The strange similarities between Amy's children and Luke, the uncanny resemblances in personality and appearance that I couldn't ignore, and the many times I had seen Amy and Luke being unusually close. I was very careful with my words, trying to keep my emotions in check, but I couldn't hide the pain in my voice. I spoke about the growing worry I felt every time I thought of Tom and Sophie, and I demanded a clear answer. Just tell me, Luke, have you and Amy ever had a romantic relationship? The question hung heavy in the air. I could feel the silence and tension as Luke looked at me, surprised, but I also sensed something else. He was holding something back. Amy immediately cut me off, her anger flaring. "What is this?" she shouted, her voice tight with frustration. "I can't believe you'd think that. There's nothing between Luke and me. We're just friends, nothing more." She shook her head in disbelief, clearly offended. I couldn't tell if she was being honest or if she was trying to protect a secret, but the tension in the room made me wonder, was I blowing things out of proportion? Luke, after a long pause, responded with a weary voice. "You know this already. We've talked about this before. There's nothing between Amy and me. I've always seen her as just a friend." His answer didn't bring me peace. It only made me feel more unsettled. Why did he sound so upset? Why couldn't I fully trust his words? Unable to hold back any longer, I demanded that he take a DNA test. For my peace of mind, for the sake of our family, for Sophie and Tom, can you please take a DNA test? I need to know the truth, no matter how painful. Luke fell silent as he looked at me, his eyes full of a sorrow I couldn't quite read. "I can't do that, you know," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "That would be the final straw. I don't want things to fall apart like that." Amy immediately reacted, unfazed. "You have no right to ask for that," she snapped. "We've helped you and your family so much, and now you want to do this to me?" I could see that she was deeply hurt, but her anger also made me feel that something was being hidden. None of us could provide a satisfying answer, and I felt like I was facing an insurmountable wall. This confrontation only made everything more uncertain. I didn't know whether I should trust their words or not, but I knew I couldn't live with the doubt any longer. My mind was spinning, and I realized that once the truth was revealed, none of us would ever be able to go back to how things were. After the tense confrontation with Luke and Amy, everything became more unclear than ever. I had asked for a DNA test to uncover the truth, but both of them refused. The discomfort in me couldn't be extinguished, and I knew I couldn't live with this doubt forever. Although Luke swore there was nothing between him and Amy, I couldn't help but feel that I was being deceived. A few days later, I decided to visit my in-laws, Jim and Kat. Although I had always had a good relationship with them, I had never shared these worries. But now, I felt the need to confide in someone. Kat, in particular, was always perceptive and could read between the lines. When I started telling her about my suspicions, I was shocked to find that she had similar thoughts to mine. "I've actually suspected it for a long time," Kat said, her eyes distant as if recalling past moments. The way Amy would visit, how Luke was always ready to help her, I always felt something was off, but Jim never believed me. Her words left me stunned, as I hadn't expected my mother-in-law to share these thoughts. Jim always thought they were just friends, but I didn't think so. I always felt there was something more between them. Jim, sitting nearby, just shook his head and said, "Kat, you're imagining things again. Luke and Amy are like siblings. I don't think there's anything wrong between them." However, I could see the exhaustion in Jim's eyes, and I knew that, even though he didn't want to face the truth, he couldn't ignore the doubts Kat had expressed. These words made me feel less alone in my thoughts, but they also made the situation even more complicated. After leaving my in-laws' house, I felt even more confused. I had asked Luke to take a DNA test, but he refused. Amy also disagreed. And now, with the revelations from Kat, I felt even more uncertain. Was I overthinking everything, or was there really something being hidden? I didn't know what to do next. My relationship with Luke hadn't cracked yet, but I felt I couldn't keep living in this uncertainty. Sophie was still involved with Tom, and no matter how much I tried to intervene, I couldn't stop worrying about her future. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, unsure of which way to go, and no matter what choice I made, there would always be an unpredictable consequence. My feelings for Luke were still there, but I couldn't help but feel confused about the secrets he and Amy might be hiding. My anxiety wasn't just about their relationship. It was about the children, about what would happen if my suspicions were true. Should I continue to search for the truth, or should I let things be and accept that sometimes some secrets are better left undiscovered?